So tonight we are chatting with Kimberly Senior, who is URI Theater's Distinguished Artist in Residence. And for those of you who don't know, the Visiting Artist program is created by the Provost Office, and they have given us, along with the Dean's Office, funding for this process of the conversation series and the Distinguished Visiting Artist program. And we really want to thank both of those offices for supporting this. I was going to read Kimberly's bio, but that would be practically the entirety of our day because she's so accomplished and has so much to offer us. And we're just so excited for her to be here. But I just want to quickly say that Kimberly is a freelance director and the director of the 2013 Pulitzer Prize winning play Disgraced. She made her HBO debut with Career Suicide, which premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. I mean, these are names, people, okay? That's how lucky we are. You also have been the recipient of Jeff Awards. You have directed in Chicago for a great deal of your career, and then in New York. And I forgot to ask you earlier, where are you zooming in from today, Kimberly?
I'm zooming in from Springfield, New Jersey, less than a mile from where I grew up.
Oh, I love that. New Jersey. I love it.
Still Jenny from the block.
And Kimberly is a member of the artistic collective at the Goodman Theater, resident director at the Writers Theater, and associate artist at Timeline Theater. Kimberly founded Collaboration. Ooh, that's a tough one. Collaboration Theater Company in 1997, and was an associate artist at Straw Dog, and 8 years an associate artist at Chicago Dramatists, and 6 years as an associate artist, at Next Theater. And on the board of, my goodness, what don't you do? And on the board, first board president of the Hypocrites. So bringing a lot to the table today to tell us a lot about the realm of theater. Over here, we have Rachel Walshe, who is our assistant professor of theater, specifically of performance, and in charge of sort of overseeing our directing and acting programs. Also, as I always have to say, one of my favorite directors to work with, as well as URI only Rhodes Scholar. So we got street cred here, people. We have street cred. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the conversation over to the two of them for a little while. I promise you we'll have lots of opportunity to ask questions. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat box for me. I'll sort of collect them. And if for some reason they're not answered during the course of this evening, then what we will do is we'll take some time to sort of go through all of those. And so I let the two of you help us understand how to stay curious. There we go.
Thanks,
so
David.
Let's start. How do we? I'm curious. I'm curious. How do we stay curious?
What are we curious about?
What are we curious about?
I'm curious about always having David Howard introduce me everywhere I go. That's what I would like in my life.
I think that can be arranged.
You're right.
Well, it certainly can, as long as you're willing to accept that I'm always going to throw out the Rhodes Scholarship, you know?
I mean, I didn't know that about you, Rachel, and now I'm like even more in awe of you that you have these accolades. But right, it's like curiosity, you know, I have these two kids, and I think we talk all the time about like the two #1 values that are most important in this house are curiosity and kindness.
Those are good ones.
And I feel like that's also what I'm trying to like bring to my work and bring to the spaces that I'm in too.
Awesome. All right. Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
So when we were chatting about what tonight might be like, we went around a lot of like themes, and what I love most about this theme, because your approach to it was so great, because we were talking a lot about like how hard this is, right? Like how hard this, like what we're literally doing right now, staring at each other in Zoom boxes. You and I, both had shows canceled like mid-stride. You said today, right? You literally have a set waiting for you. And you said like, which I'm so grateful for. So it's like, we got to talk about how hard it is. And you're like, I think that maybe we have to talk about staying curious amidst this and what that might be like and what that might mean. And I thought, oh yes, right. So I thought we could start there. And as we chatted last time, like Mary posed the last question of the last class, which was so great. So shout out Mary Mullane. I think we're gonna start with Mary's question because it seems like a really great launching point, right, for what this time is like and what this conversation might hold. So I'm gonna literally read what Mary wrote.
Yeah, so let's read Mary's question.
Literally, absolutely read it. Hold on, I gotta get my phone up. All right, nope, that's not what I'm looking for.
Thank you, Mary.
Yes. Okay, so Mary wrote 2 questions and we got to the first one, but not the last one. So this is her second question. Also, how have your directing beliefs / values changed during pandemic time with some time off? So what do you think?
What do you think? I mean, right, it's been such a journey, and I know we've hit on some of this in different ways and different times, but I think like the phases of it have been fascinating, right? First there was shock, and remember the like shifting sands of the calendar where we were like, oh, it's just a couple weeks, like, oh no, oh, by this, let's check what's happening in the summer. Like it didn't really dawn on us for a while. Like we didn't know in that moment we were going to be home for a year plus, right? So there was a growing sense of things that are happening, but I can cite some really specific things before I like talk in general, which is that in the beginning, and perhaps still, one of the challenges has been realizing that so much of my self-worth has been wrapped up in my work. And that instead of saying, like, I do this work, I have been saying, I am this work. And so that this time has helped me start to try to make that separation, which I think a lot of that was met with a lot of darker moments of having to really understand, like, I am not my work. Like I still have value if I am not making, and I am still an artist if I'm not in a rehearsal room. And like, what do those things mean? And not to replace them or fill them with other definitions, right? Because I also am like a much more full-time mom than I've ever been, but I can't just like transfer that energy to be able, now I do this 200%, like, or before I directed plays 200%.
Yep.
But to really understand like what it means to be an artist in the world. And I've had to practice some of the things that I've preached for a really long time, right? Which is about like, how do we prepare? How do we pay attention to detail? How do we, if I were to title these like chapters of the autobiography of my life, like there's one chapter titled Fortress Building. And now I think I'm moving into the chapter called Preparation. And to understand that what that means. And I think that I have allowed myself to remain curious and ask questions about what it means to be an artist in the world. And also to ask questions of the world around me, like, what are the stories we want to be telling? What is my role in telling those stories in a larger social justice kind of way? What is my role in the American theater? How am I part of the solution or part of the problem? But I do think that there's something that so like all of these things are informed by one another, right? It's like they're all happening at once. And so you're like, how do I separate the fact that really the only place that I'm truly comfortable is in a rehearsal room? Like I am awkward staying home all the time. Like I am most myself when I am getting to do this thing, which is my essence. And so now that that's been taken from me, what do I do with that? And then I went through, of course, the phase of like, maybe I don't want to direct anymore. Maybe, which that was like 2 days, but it was still there. And then also the deep grief, like recognizing like I am in mourning. I am as Masha as they get in mourning for my life right now. Like it's that is my life and I miss it. And I was texting with a friend the other day and they were texting about like what they miss about being in process or whatever. And I just sent one text that just said, I miss myself. Like, I miss that Kimberly, like that version of her. And I'm sure she's like here in some other way, but there's just something about being that can't be imitated in this moment, which is like, we have this nut to crack. We have this question we're wrestling, and we're doing it in a room together. And whether that is like doing it in a room together in a design meeting, doing a room together in a rehearsal where we're working through scenes, doing a room together in tech, doing a room together in previews where we invite the audience to start solving that problem with us. Like, you cannot do that here. And that is okay. I am okay with that. And I know I will do it again in some way, right? Like anytime we're even an audience member, we're a part of that conversation. And I eagerly welcome cracking nuts in the company of others who come with their variety of perspectives and, you know, all of that stuff. So, I mean, that's kind of like a long answer to Mary's question. Like, and then then there's the whole like practical, like I've really honed my skills at directing audio, and I've like really gotten to do some like skill building and some really cool stuff in that way. Like I also have like read a lot of really great novels. I've caught up on a lot of television, and I have like so happily gotten to like read my New York Times cover to cover every day and do the crossword and like watch all the NBA games my heart desires. Like there's so many things that are also part of my essentials. To play tennis 5 days a week, like that's why I use fortress building and preparation, because we need those things. And I started by saying I've had to practice some of which I preach, where you've all heard me say, like, be a human being first, like 365-degree awareness, like don't only make work. But I unfortunately have not lived the life that I often espouse, you know, like to say it to other people, like, please don't do what I did. Because one day a global pandemic will hit and you will have no clue who you are.
So I have two kind of follow-up questions about that. One is, are there like nuts to crack, problems to solve, you know, through your work that you feel like are very urgent to you right now that might not have been had it not be for this time? You know, the stories that you're like, wow, this is something I want to kind of get in the room with a group of people to work on. So that's one follow-up question. The other is, because I had this experience where I felt like I did not know myself very well clearly. I had not spent enough time with myself clearly for most of my adult life, apparently, until I was home, right? And with my family, with myself, and without the workaholism to kind of like take over. And then so I wonder if there are certain dimensions of the home time that have sensitized you to certain aspects of like plays. Like that's how I felt, like, gosh, like I am so really well equipped to direct plays about families in ways I thought I was. And like, I wasn't. And you know what I mean? Just that, like you're saying, that human dimension, that stuff that you just have to be, right? So there's like two questions, like what are the problems, what are the nuts you hope to crack that are like driving you now that might have not been before? And then are there specifics about the home time that you're like, yes, I'm so glad I re-sensitized that to part of my being? Does that make sense?
It does. I think they're related ish, but like the like big questions now for me, which are like, how do we talk to each other? So some of it is, right, again, conversation with a friend, they're like, it feels like the light is at the end of the tunnel. I was like, yes, we can stop panicking about some of the things we were panicking about before. And now we can panic about new things. Like, now that I can work, will I? Now that I can see friends, do I want to? Like, you know, like we could have like new panics now. But that the questions so I wonder, like, how do we talk to each other on this small scale of like, now that we have been living in this kind of isolation and doing all this stuff, like how do we re-find one another? And And what does that look like? Which is obviously a new question. But there is also the question of like, there has been nothing made more clear to me that we do not understand each other as like a people. And whether that is like the rift between like men and women, where men and women. I mean, I had someone who I respect and admire, a man say to me, like, really, is the patriarchy that bad? And I was like, we are friends and I don't know how to explain that to you. Like, he's like, but it's been fine for you. And I'm like, has it really? Can I like, and how do you not know that? Because you're like a friend of mine that I like trust and respect. Like, so like, I'm like, oh, if I can't talk to this person, you know, and obviously the disparities and inequities that we have like throughout this country in every way along every single fault line, like, and in every community and in every way, like there is no place where I feel people actually understand each other, and that has been exposed for us. So I'm like, now that we have all these like geologic fault lines exposed, you know, I was in one of the classes saying the other day, like, we have just become the most essential people in society, storytellers. Like, this is our time, because we are, I don't know, maybe was it in your acting class, Shannon, that we got super deep about this, but it was like this sense of what is the job of the actor and of the storyteller, and it's that we have to act out these tragedies for people so they can stop doing them in their regular lives. And given the objective distance of being an audience, you can watch your nature both like assemble and dissemble in front of you and like work some stuff out without having to like kill your neighbor. And like, that's our job right now. And so there are a lot of hard conversations that are happening, and I am excited to see what happens, right? Like, there's a part of me that's like, oh, we just need more representation on our stages. But to me, that's not the answer. I'm like, no, we need more like conflict. We need to not be delicate anymore about what we're putting on the stage. And in any way, and whether that's inside of a family, right? Because we're seeing those things inside of families, whether it's inside an institution, whether it's like on a global scale, like whatever it is, like so I feel those are the questions that, because I don't have the answers for them sitting at home alone in my room, I actually require other people to work on these things with. Mm-hmm. That I really, really, really can't wait for that. And in terms of me, it's interesting, right? Like, that what you said really struck a chord with me, that I can't like just kind of go hide in the work, which is just what I do, and having to like be alone with myself. And I am very alone with myself. Like, I don't have a partner. I'm the only adult in my home. I live in suburban New Jersey, where I moved to be near my parents who could help me take care of my kids when I spend 10 months of the year on the road. Like, I didn't intend to live here. I don't have friends here. I don't see other adults. I'm not at a workplace where we occasionally are in person or see one another. Like, I don't have a steady job. Like, this is a huge shock to me, of someone who's coming from being around hundreds of people all the time in a daily way. And so the lack of like peer connection, the lack of like adult partnership, you know, in any way, has been like really shocking to me, like having to just be alone with my own thoughts all of the time, and like there's nowhere even to bounce them off of. And I'm a Gemini, and I I feel like my introverted twin has gotten to take the lead this year in a way that like she has never had the chance to before. And I love like what she comes up with as like a good idea. You know, like she has a lot of really good ideas, and now I'm like, I want to be able to give her a voice in like my world. And it's been great. I mean, obviously there have been days where I feel like super sorry for myself, and I'm like, can't someone else just be in charge of something? It is only me, you know? But like, I think a lot of people feel that, and like what it's like to be a working parent during this pandemic, and a single mother. I mean, like all those things we can go into. And the New York Times has definitely written enough articles about me, not me personally, but about my situation, that like, whether they're talking about how horrible it is to be an artist right now, how horrible it is to be a single parent, or how hard it is to be a working woman right now, I'm covered in pretty much every sob story article they write on Sundays. Like, and my mother keeps sending them to me. I'm like, I know how bad it is. I do not need my awareness raised. But yeah, I think that that's like a lot of it is about really kind of like letting in that Like, I think my boundaries are a lot clearer now. And,
Mm.
yesterday's a really great example. Like, I had a really full day with you guys. It was delicious and amazing and wonderful. But like, super engaging. There were 2 acting classes back to back. And then afterwards, I actually had another meeting that was like right away. And so I had been on the Zoom and putting out energy. Right. Because there's sometimes you're on the Zoom and you're like on your phone, or sometimes you're on the Zoom and you can kind of do other things. This was like me being on the Zoom, like I am here,
Mm-hmm.
like for hours. And which again, loved every single minute of it. But afterwards I was like, okay, we're putting on soft clothes. We're gonna be really quiet. We might not even talk to our children. Like
Mm-hmm.
the phone is ringing, you're not answering it. Like I put my phone away. I didn't even want to watch TV. I was like, I just need to be like quiet and still, because I I found a different way to recharge than I'd had before. Where like recharging for me was in quiet and stillness, and not in like getting it from bright lights, big city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I hear that I call it the Zoom death mask, like by,
Yeah, Erin calls it the Zoom coma. She just
Zoom
wrote
coma.
showed
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and self-care and yes, Alana, 100%, so many different forms, right? Sometimes it is like soft close silence. And sometimes it is like, I need to talk to another adult that doesn't do art at all, actually.
Civilian. Yeah.
Well,
you married a civilian, which was really smart.
yes, I think that's why.
I said that to you at the time. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
saying this for a while to you. Yeah.
It is. It definitely, but he's a civilian, those who know him, who like also paints. So it's so great. But like, yes, I dated enough theater people in my life before I
I'm
found
yet to
Chris.
find a civilian. If anybody
Yeah,
knows one,
find Kimberly a civilian, because it definitely, I think that's why we're still
I'm
married.
like banker, like hit me up, accountants, like,
I know that's the only, I miss the like civilian with money, but that's all right. We love Chris for other reasons.
Yeah. He's very good looking and he made really cute kids, whatever.
They are cute. There's many of them. Speaking of kids and family, because you did bring it up too, and I think it's definitely something on my mind, and something I spent a lot of my time with you as a young director, like gnawing my own fingernails off about, which is like, what is this industry like for women? What is this industry like for parents? What is this industry like for moms? And I know, many in our audience aren't necessarily there yet, but I do think that, you and I have certainly navigated the weeds of the ways this industry does and does not support the many kinds of people that come into its under the tent. And we both wear the hat of women and mom. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
The one thing I want to say right off the bat is I actually think this time has changed the way we see that, because we can't, like, there might be an Edith bomb tonight and we're psyched about it, right? Like you can't hide your children.
Right.
Like, I think a lot of what this industry was like for moms before is like, we don't have kids, don't worry about it. Like, I was so afraid that someone like wouldn't consider me for a job because they were in a kind way worrying about my childcare situation, right? And it's like, nope, there's no kids, there's no childcare situation, don't worry about it, right? Like, that was the thing. Even in people's kindness, there was a thing about that. So I just want to say that I think now we all know that everybody, and this isn't just about parents, right? That everybody's a human being. Like, some people are like, I have to like go off screen for a second, like whether it's to like blow my nose or go to the bathroom or do whatever, but like we're allowed to do that. We see people's pets, the like humanity of being in each other's like living spaces. Or, oh gosh, what happened in class yesterday? That acting class for the alarm, they were testing the alarm in my building. Like, I couldn't do anything about that, and we couldn't change the time of class. So like there we were, and the alarm was going off like crazy, and I had to just like type in the chat for 5 minutes. Like, that our humanity, which includes being parents and pet parents and plant parents, Alana. These things are real, and yet I'm still a great teacher, even when the alarm is going off, and like I can still do my life. Like, so I think that that's just one of the things that I think is an exciting thing about this time. But I do want to speak specifically to being a woman in this industry, which is the only thing I've been, so the only thing I can speak to. And And which is to say that when I was coming up in this industry, there were not a lot of women ahead of me who were doing what I was doing. There were a few women who were running institutions, which I was not doing. There were a couple of female directors, but they were affiliated with an institution, be it academic or artistic. Like there weren't really like freelance directors that were women, and certainly not mothers. And I didn't have a lot of mentorship in that way. I've had a lot of great mentors, and and many of them are men, and they've been amazing. Right? So it's like, not to say there wasn't a lot that I learned, but the only leadership style that I had was everything for me was about imitating men for a really long time, and like what that meant. And sometimes, I mean, and some of it is stuff that's just become who I am, like being a sports fanatic, and I can talk like sports statistics and stuff like that. Was a way that I was like trying to fit in with people, was like with like dudes, you know, and drinking a lot of whiskey and gambling and like things that I just, that are all things that I still do and enjoy. But it's like, there was a thing. I mean, it's interesting, David, that I didn't talk about this today. And we were talking about clothes. Like there's a way I talked about my stance, I think, right, about how or in some class I talked about my stance, but I also spent like 10 years wearing baseball hats and baggy jeans and hoodies and Converse, like hiding, you know, and it took me a long time to like bring what was feminine about me into a room, because I didn't see a lot of feminine leaders. So if I was feminine, I wouldn't be in charge. And the women I saw in charge had masculine qualities. And so that has been like a lot of what it has been for me. And I was speaking with as I do very often, a young woman who is a director, and she said, like, how did you make it all these years? And I said, well, I smiled and nodded a lot and waited till they were done speaking. And she like held my hands, and she's like, well, you don't have to do that anymore. And I like, this was back when we could touch people. And I went like this, and I said, no, you don't have to do that, because I did it for you. Like, you're not saving me because you feel like realized. I felt realized too. Like I had those feelings too, but like I did some work so that now like the road is paved to not have to do that bullshit anymore. Mm-hmm. And to like be able to stand up, because there are women in front of you like Rachel and myself who have achieved things in a male dominated industry. So now they're like, oh, women can be like pretty and smart, and women can like have opinions and not be bitches, or like whatever any of those things are. Like we made some space. We had to carve that space out and massage that space out. Like it wasn't just about like setting off, detonating bombs and like blowing mm-hmm. down things. There were a lot of different ways we had to go about that. And now, and by the way, not solved. And there's so much work left to be done. And I'm terrified about how much more work is left to be done. I don't know if did you watch Mrs. America?
No. David has.
Oh, yes.
Well,
oh,
I had to watch
yes,
it because of the clothes. My God, it's like the best costume show in the history of television. But so it's so good. But it, you know, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, you should watch it. It's a limited series. I think it was on Hulu, mm-hmm. and it essentially tells the story of a wave of feminism in the 60s, and like the birth of Miss Magazine and Gloria Steinem, and we have a bunch. Shirley Chisholm is in there, and Bella Abzug, and all these women, and it's so great. It's so empowering, and you watch it, and it's really about Phyllis Schlafly, who was like the root of all evil, and it gets her human side, and maybe it doesn't, and like essentially it also say there's a lot of different types of women, and it's so well acted and so beautifully designed, and really worth like watching for that aspect alone, even if you only watch one episode. So I'm not ruining anything for you because it's history. At the end of it, you are reminded that the ERA is still not passed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I sat there and was like, I suck. How have I not carried on the work of these women? Like how did it become good enough? Like what is that? And it reminds me of many moments in the history of women of like, well, we got white women the right to vote, so I guess that was enough. Like there's so many moments in women's history where we're like, we're real tired. We got this one thing done. You know, it's like, no, there's so much more.
Mhm.
And I really felt a little bit like a failure. Like we have not carried on the torch of that moment. And I mean, I remember going to vote for Hillary, and I brought my daughter with me, and then I like thought, and I spoke to her about like, this vote is for my grandmother who never believed this would be possible, for my mother who told me it was possible, but I didn't really believe her, right? Like, and for you who will never know a world where it is not possible to have a female candidate for president. Like, nowhere in your world will that ever be untrue. And to think that's not really that long.
No.
Right? I mean, my grandmother was born in what, 1916? I mean, it's like just 100 years. It was 100 years. That's not really that long. And so I'm just very sort of moved by that continuum. And I think similarly, like we're seeing this in so many ways of just, like I was saying, I didn't have examples in front of me. And now, like the women I saw in leadership positions were teachers. And if you would consider strippers and stewardesses also leadership positions, which I think they can be, like those are the places where women were in charge. And now there are so many more, like, I mean, when I grew up, my pediatrician was male, like my doctors were all male, like now all my doctors are women. Then my kids have female doctors and we don't even think about it. And there's like the superintendent of the school district I'm in is a woman, and like the CEO of Walgreens is a woman, and like, you know, and we keep seeing like there's so many, there are now like women who are like in in charge of sports franchises, like things we never thought were going to happen. And so it can stop being a big deal. Like I would like to not have this conversation anymore. Right. You know, like, can it be over? Can we talk about the things we actually need to do, which is like tell these really important stories? Like, can we not make like how to get by as a woman the subject of matter anymore? It's boring and I want it to be over, and I want to talk about other things. And so I feel like we're getting super close to that moment where we can still celebrate all the amazing things that make us women. And okay, there's this book, it's called The Power by Naomi. Her first name's Naomi and her last name is something else.
Great.
And she wrote a book called The Power, and in it, it's kind of like sci-fi dystopian future, but there basically is this thing that like is in some people's bodies and can sort of be harvested for power. And it ends up that this like faction of women end up getting it. And I am going to ruin the book for you, which is like at the end of the book, like the women suck as much as the men that were in charge in the beginning. And it's this really like dispiriting conversation about power. And you think about how so many times, you know, I play tennis with this like group of people, and one of them has this like horrible female boss, Naomi Alderman. Thank you. And she was like, yeah, she's like, this, my boss is just basically acting out the behavior of all the people that have oppressed her before, right? Where like when the victim becomes in charge, or when the subverted becomes on top, they then all they have to do is imitate the behavior that held them down. And we are not able to sort of move forward, which is the Bella Abzug quote that I kind of talked about today, which is like, the idea is not to transfer power, but to transform power. And so how do we transform the nature of power? And I think that that's like a really, gosh, Rachel, I have just gone on a spiral from whatever original question you were asking.
That was no spiral. That was no, it's all exact. It was about where we're at, and just, and exactly what we're talking about, just the nature of, you know, about, yes, women and mothers, and sort of the waves of like kind of pushing through the next barrier, pushing through the next, oh, there is an entire family about to walk behind me.
I mean, I can't wait.
Prepare.
So excited.
So all more than relevant. I guess my follow-up to that is, and I love thinking about that, right? Not transfer power, but transform. Right. We have power dynamics at play in a lot of different spheres, including ours, right? Including making art, including a rehearsal room. And I'm wondering if there's ways that you feel like you want to see power transform in our own neck of the woods.
I love it. The parade.
There they go. Where's Edith? Oh, she's running. I think they have takeout, so that's always better than mom, takeout.
Oh, I know, my kids got pizza tonight. And mozzarella sticks, which is like
what? That sounds delicious. So yeah, so I'm just wondering, what that
yeah, I mean, I feel like some of it is that, like, just hearing different voices, right? Like that's who has the power is who's holding the megaphone. You know, like so just like passing it over to somebody else. I mean, like, what do you have to say? I've never heard from you before. Is really exciting, and I can't wait for that. And I think that that's work we can do really quickly and easily. And I think there's also about, again, I apologize for those of you that I'm repeating things that I said earlier today, but that the sense of like the hierarchical structure that exists is one that, like, I'm pretty sure nobody on this Zoom created or wants to participate in. So like, why don't we change it? Whether that's like the way that we work, like making the way that we work more human, putting artists in charge instead of, I was asked last night about, like, do you think it'd be a good idea to structure a theater organization where there's like a CEO and then there's like a collective of artists that reports to that CEO? And I was like, no, there should be artists and then a collection of like business people that report to the artists. Like, what are you talking about? We make art. You know, it's oh gosh. Okay, so this podcast, The Test Kitchen, which is part of Reply All, which is part of a larger crazy story about Gimlet Media, which has its own problems. But the initial part of it was about the Test Kitchen was exposing about how Bon Appetit is like the most fucked up place on earth. And that the original sin of that was that they hired a guy who knows nothing about food or cooking to run it. Right. And it was like, and that he was all about like making it cool, like how to make it cool, and everything was like coolness. And so for him, it was like, no, I'm really about the food. And I feel like sometimes we have that problem in the theater where it's like some people who are in charge are people who are not about like the power of storytelling or what that is. And it's like, when we see theaters where the marketing department is bigger than the artistic department, and you're like, hold up, wait, there are
most of America.
There are more people here to market the thing we're making than there are people to make it. Okay, got it. Okay, cool.
Right, that's like most of the
more.
Yes,
also
a lot more
to make it. So I think there's some like, and that's because we've borrowed a structure from corporate America, right? It's like we're just borrowing structures. And I'm like, hey, theater people, we're pretty creative. Like, why don't we make our own structure? Like, what's the way to do that? And so that's some of the ways that I think too. But I also would like to, and hopefully be a part of this. And I think Rachel and David, from what I know of you, David, and Rachel knowing you, like, we're a part of modeling a different type of behavior and a different type of leadership, so that again, like, this will not be a question anymore. Like how we lead and who we are in rooms becomes authentic and not performative, becomes nurturing and holistic. Like that's the direction we're headed, because that's what our work is about. That's what this industry is about. And so if we can get back to that, like, generative, like the root that's there of why we're all here in the first place, and stop doing this other thing that feels corporate. I mean, it's interesting, like, in some weird way, directing the show on Broadway, and certainly my work at HBO, were the times that it felt most like holistic and chill. It's like when places have no money is when they like panic and have to rely on some structure. You know, I mean, gosh, I remember being in tech on Broadway and being like, my folks are tired. We got to go home.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then being like, okay, cool.
Wow. Well, you see, like, when the financial pressure, it's like, because so many times the answer really is economic justice, right? Paying people what they're worth and recognizing that our labor is valuable and deserves, pay, of course, but also like to recognize the humanity of every person, right?
And that's what we do. That is what our actual work is. We are here to like celebrate humanity, and like, that's what we actually do. Why would we not be doing that ourselves? Why would we not be practicing that behavior?
Exactly. Awesome.
I wanted to say something too about when you were talking about people being paid and in equity for artists, I worked at Jiva Theater, which is in Rochester. It's a regional theater. And it was, but I was very low. I was the wardrobe supervisor, but I was one of the few full-time permanent artists. And we had 20 people in the development, marketing, administrative offices. And there were, I think it ended up being 5 full-time people. And we made a quarter collectively of what they did, And now again, they were very good at what they did, but it became this thing where all of a sudden you're saying we're putting out these plays that are about humanity and about social justice and all these things. And yet even within our own walls, organizationally, they couldn't see how that was having an impact on us. And I think we're starting to see that in a lot of ways, we have some questions.
But also we have to be a part of it. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but David, in that moment when you knew that, you felt probably not able to speak up about it, right?
Oh, of course.
Right. And so now what we have to do is speak, collectively speak up, right? Yeah. That we have to all be and I got your back, and to take that risk of okay, wardrobe supervisor, this is not fair and you need to speak up, and don't be afraid to lose your job, because we will not let that happen, or we've got you, or we'll make sure you get another job, or
right.
How are we coming together? Because I think so many things, my dad, he actually runs my brother's company, which is a post-production house, and so he's often writing the checks for the artists, and he's well, all the artists love working with me because I pay them on time. And I was you do not get an award for doing what is required of you.
Right.
Paying people on time is not prize-worthy. That's, and also, by the way, these are, because my argument to him was that artists should get paid a portion of their fee up front. He's before they've done the work. And I said to him, okay, put your daughter in that position. I have to do the work. Who is taking care of my children when I do the work? That's someone I have to pay. What am I eating while I do the work? Who is putting the lights on while I do the work? You have to pay me so I can create conditions in which I can do the work. That is what that is. Other than that, I'm a volunteer until you've written me a check.
Right.
And then he's well, no one's ever complained. And I said, well, because they can't, because if they complain, they'll think you'll never hire them again. They'll call you a squeaky wheel, so we have to just now advocate for one another. And honestly, it's those of you that are coming up now. And we had this conversation in one of the classes, working for free is okay. And everybody does it. And there are situations that are going to be really valuable where you should put yourself out there, and you should because you have access to someone or something or some place that's going to be endlessly valuable to you. It is okay to do some things for free, but not everything for free, and to really know your value and say I have to get paid for my time, because you would not ask a surgeon to operate on you as a volunteer.
Right.
And what I do is a skill that I have acquired and that I am trained to do and that I practice, and I should be paid for that.
Yeah.
And it might not be a lot at first, and that's okay. And I know for me, my attitude shifted the first time I got a $100 paycheck to direct something. That was the first fee I ever got. And it was worth $1,000. It was worth $10,000 to me, because it said, we value you. There is, what you do is a commodity. It's a resource. It's a commodity. These things and it totally shifted my thinking. So it's not even about the amount. It's just about saying you have to pay me.
Right. Well, we have this issue, and we'll get to the questions in 2 seconds, but we are sort of modeled on this idea of corporate ideas of what is hourly and what is a rate. And all of a sudden we get very nervous, because then it's well, what is anything? What is, I get to the point where I'm but what is money? Because it's almost impossible to figure out how to do that. And again, I'm a, socialist. So I feel okay, everybody just gets $500 and there we go. Right.
Which we get, we get the $500 from taxing the rich.
Correct. Yeah. And a bag of potatoes. A quick question. So to speak in a better world, Lauren sort of asked a question about how do you Um,
Love that, Lauren.
how do you stay positive? How do you stay, especially, I remember, being a young person and just not having a lot of places to think, what are your positive self-talk? What it's a land also of a lot of disappointments, a lot of rejection. How do we move through that?
I'm like, I think we should be asking you this, because I did say to Rachel today that I think you might be the one more like enthusiastic, positive person on earth than me. Like, I was like,
but the thing is,
I think I just want to find out what you're eating. And
yeah, ask everybody who knows me, and they know that I'm bitter and resentful and angered.
Oh,
but
and I can't wait to find your dark side. But, I mean, Lauren, it's such an important question, and it's something that you're going to wrestle with your whole life. Like, it doesn't go away. And I'm sorry to tell you that. And I also hope that that's comforting, which is like, there's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys, and there's going to be times that you feel on top of the world, and there's going to be times that you feel like the gum on the bottom of someone's shoe. And like, all those things are going to be true. And I actually find that notion very freeing, which is to say, like, I talk about a lot of, like, when you think about like a timeline in history class, like, this moment is a dot on my timeline. Yeah. And like, it might feel really big right now, but the further I get from it, the smaller it will appear. And that that there is something to come. And it's also helpful perspective when you are on top of everything to know this is only a dot on my timeline. And like, there are dark days to come. And it's funny, my niece, in my little Zoom break I had today, my niece just found out that she is getting braces in 3 weeks, and that they will be on her teeth for her bat mitzvah. And this to her was, I mean, I think she said to me, I will never get over it. Like, I think came out of her mouth. And I said to her, that's really understandable. You're having one of those moments where your like idea of how something was supposed to be is turning out to be quite different than what it's actually going to be, right? She had already envisioned those photographs. She like, and so for her, the distance between those things is that part of what our issues are is that there's a disconnect between our expectation and the reality. Yeah. So then it becomes about my advice is in terms of like managing those expectations, instead of saying like, in this next year, I'm definitely going to get like paid to direct a play or whatever it is, or this next year, I'm definitely going to like do this, like making those things, things that you are in control of, which is like, this year, like, I'm going to bring my best self into every conversation I'm in, like, or this year I'm going to, setting goals for yourself that are achievable so that you don't end up in a place of like disappointment and failure. And they can be very lofty ideas, right? Like you can, that's not dreaming small. It's dreaming really big to have those kind of expectations of yourself. And you're probably going to fail yourself sometimes too, but then you'll have yourself to deal with. Right. But it's, I find too that like those, the negativity is like helpful, because then when you like move out of it, you have a different perspective too. And, like a friend of mine talks, this great actor, his name's Larry Ando, and he talks about how he says, you don't want to live your life in the ones and the tens, right? Like the ones are like the blues and the tens are the highs. He's like, all we're trying to do is live in the fives. And like, I think about that a lot sometimes, like when I'm like thinking about my day and I'm like, whew, this day, I was living too much in the tens. Like, this is not good. I'm going to fall. This is going to be bad. I also highly recommend reading Jose Rivera's commencement speech that he gave to the University of like Southern California or something in the 90s or whatever it was. But like, that is a thing that always helps. I guess that's just what I'm going to say. Like, go find it. It always helps.
Well, I think that covers Alana's question too, which is what is some of the best advice you have just passed on. Incredible advice, but also, Jose Rivera, that's
Jose Rivera, anything. Yeah. But yeah. Right, no, but my favorite advice is the three things, right? Which is always be making your own work, whatever that means, right? And your own work can be like getting some friends together and just reading a play out loud that none of you have ever read, but probably should have, when you're like, oh shit, we never read Lysistrata. Like, let's get together and read that. Or we never read Godot. Like, that's making art, or actually making art. Always be in service of someone else's work, like something that you have no horse in the race. Like, how are you helping somebody else do their work? And whether it is, you know, looking at someone's drawings for something that they're planning, or giving feedback, or who knows what that can be. And then the third thing is always do something that has nothing to do with making work. And if you do those three things, you will have a happy life.
Yeah.
The end.
Say quarantine, this should be a quick one. Say quarantine ends safely tomorrow, and you can do any sort of project you want. What would you gravitate towards? I should do my countdown where I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You have to answer.
I mean, honestly, I want to do like a public spectacle. I want to do a huge, like, a thing I've never even made before. Like, I want it to be like wild and expansive and like, and happening and surprising, but it's like, it's not pop-up. It's like pop up. It's like this thing that suddenly comes out of nowhere and involves tiny children and old people, and like it's like part parade, but there's really amazing storytelling involved, and the line between spectator and spectacle, it's like it's Brazilian. It's like it's
Well, Rachel and I were sort of saying the same thing when we came out of this. We're just like, we want to do this huge thing, just to like fireworks of theatricality, you know,
right. I want to see people touching each other. I want to see people wrestling. I want
just making out. Just lots of people making out who don't know each other.
I want like sweat. I want like human,
like
it's just human raw expression. I want something that's the way that we all feel when we've been let out of our cages. Like, I spent 20 years in Chicago, and if any of you have spent time in Chicago, it gets a little chilly.
Yeah.
And the first day, there's always like a day in March that for some weird reason it's like 75 degrees. It's like one day, and then it like there's a snowstorm the next day. But that one day, it's suddenly like everyone is like taking up. There's so much skin everywhere. Like, people are walking around in like tank tops and shorts and halters, and people are kissing and holding hands, and everybody's smiling. And it's this like amazing, like super sensual, but like not sexual, just sort of sensual, just like this loving of the smells and what everything can be on that day. And I always like love that day in Chicago, and everyone's so friendly and great. And I'm like, I want to make the like uber spectacle of what that moment feels like.
Yeah. Well, and I think that ties back to what you were saying too, you know, like you can't appreciate that 10 if every day is a 10. And that's why everybody in Los Angeles is miserable, right? Because they have that 10 all the time.
They're paralyzed. And also time doesn't move. They have no seasons. That place is fucked up. Yeah.
Miserable.
Shannon needs an answer.
Yeah.
Shannon needs an answer. She has worked so hard for us this week. She wants to know, how did you get involved with the Marvel podcast?
Oh, that's such an easy one, Shannon. You could have asked me anytime. So this is a great thing for those of you, when I keep talking about like, look around, you're going to be working with each other, you're going to know each other. So I was on the hunt to only work with female designers in the theater, because I realized that so many of my collaborators were male, and I loved collaborating with them, but that I needed to know more female designers. And so I met this female sound designer named Jill. And Jill and I started working together back in like 2000. I think we did our first one in 2011. And then Jill ended up coming to Broadway with me and doing Disgraced on Broadway with me. And the day of opening, Jill and I had lunch together, and we sat outside, and she said, I want you to know this is the last show I'm going to design. Adam and I are getting married, and he's an actor, and we want to have kids. And so like someone has to earn a living, and you know, it's fine if it's me. And I just got this great full-time job where I'm going to run an audio podcast division for the New Yorker magazine. And I was like, that is so cool. She's like, so I'm not going to design anymore, but we're still going to be great friends. So she goes to the New Yorker and she does her thing. And a few years later, I call her and I'm like, can I drag you out of retirement? Because I I'm doing this one-person show with Harvey Fierstein about Bella Abzug at Manhattan Theater Club, and Harvey's really particular, and I'm really particular, and MTC is really particular, and it's not a big job, like, and I really want to work with you. You're the only person that can do it. She says, fine. This is in 2018. We do that show, and then opening night of that show, Jill says to me, so my job at the New Yorker got really boring, because like there's just so much you can do about like, you know, that machine's not broken, the New Yorker, and like what audio, you're not like starting a whole new thing. So how many of our articles can we record? How many conversations can we have that aren't already appearing in the magazine? So I just got this job at Marvel, and Marvel is also they have this partnership with SiriusXM, and they're starting this new audio division. And I was like, that's so cool. Cool. Then fast forward, Jill calls me and she says, oh, the Bella Abzug piece we also recorded for Audible. And so at that time, Jill was like, oh, wow, you're really good at this. I said, well, I've done these like 8 other projects with Audible. I just keep doing stuff with Audible Theater. So then it comes time to start hiring people for these podcasts that Jill was producing. And I was the first person she called.
Wow.
And she was like, do you want to do this? She's like, you're one of the few people I know who's like a really good director who also knows how to work in audio. You know how to develop scripts, and like, are you free? Would you be interested in doing this? And so I was like, absolutely, send me all the material. And I like really boned up on my Marvel knowledge and had like one meeting with her they're her peers, right? She's like in charge, but she has like 2 counterparts, and we all met and it was just done. I mean, so again, like I've talked a lot about like, that wasn't me networking, right? It wasn't like, oh, we got a job from Marvel, can I work for Marvel? It wasn't that. It was that Jill also, this is the first of these podcast series that they're doing. So Jill needed someone she could trust and work with in that job. Yeah. She was not ready to hire a stranger.
Right.
She was like, I have to be able to talk to this person, and I trust Kimberly to do it. And my resume and ability to be in that room and have that conversation got me the job, but Jill got me in the room.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is awesome. And it's important, like, especially now, you were saying earlier, you know, all of these things that we're listening to and watching, they're all important to us right now. And they're going to really, I think this is going to be a golden age of media in so many ways. We're going to at least remember it as a golden age of media because of how much we're reconnecting with it. Mm-hmm. Aaron Haas, I'm going to leave Aaron's question to be the last, and this is for both of you. So Rachel, and it's going to be timed. It's going to be timed because then it's the true thing. I need 2 things that you are grateful for right now. Ready?
Oh, Lord.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Grateful.
For my health.
Yeah.
I've stayed healthy. And weirdly, I am grateful this happened. I am a year of this. And I'll just say one reason. There's a lot, but the one big one is, as an artist, I think I do feel, you know, Kimberly was talking about the hunger for the uber spectacle, right? And for me, I think I realize that I've spent a lot of my career trying to do it right. And that's maybe the worst thing you could try to do as an artist, right? Is to be correct.
Yeah, killer. Mm-hmm.
And now that, you know, it's like, it could be gone tomorrow. Yeah. Why would I spend a breath of my creative energy trying to do it right ever again? Because I have gone without it now for, as of in, you know, 8 days, it'll be exactly a year, right? So it's a gift. And I'm a middle-aged woman. I have the rest of my life ahead of me to hopefully, because I have my health so far. And I know that I'm not getting rich and famous anyway. So why be right or safe?
You're not rich? Come on.
Weird.
You got that fancy tenure track job.
Right.
So again, remember, this is recorded, Rachel. I'm going to come back to you in like a year and a half, and I'm going to be like, remember when you said.
Yeah, right, Alana, that's right. But wasn't I screaming at you guys last week? Screaming at you.
Yeah.
You people are supposed, especially you amazing young people, are the ones who are supposed to be making the stuff that we old people are like, oh my God, they're naked again. Why are the kids out
Well,
there?
not naked, not naked. They can't be naked in the building, but yes.
You know what I mean?
Making.
When I was in college, we could be naked in the building. Times have really changed.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, when I was in college, we could smoke and be naked and,
Yeah.
drink booze
Okay.
in the building.
Mhm.
So Kimberly, you got the advantage of hearing the question. So
I know, and I already like have my emotional response to myself.
So ready?
I'm
One,
really
two,
grateful.
go.
I'm really grateful that my life's work is a place where I get to listen to, study, and engage with the like Jurassic mess of being a human being. And so it's actually sort of like in response in a way to what Rachel's saying about perfection, and that like I love that the work I do is about what makes us messy. And I'm grateful for that because I can hopefully model that behavior for my kids and for the other people I'm around and practice it myself. Because I think the world will be better when we have space for that. And I am right, just like on that basic level, like just I'm really grateful for my like super cool kids.
That's great.
Guys, I've never really spent this kind of time with these human beings. And they're cool and smart, and I like hanging out with them, and they're curious and they're kind and they're funny and quirky and strange. And sometimes there's just like 3 roommates here, and sometimes I'm their mom, but like they're old enough now that's like we just gotta hang out. Like I really I'm just grateful for them and their flexibility and coolness that they've had my sort of whole life, but that it's a real gift. And I'm not saying everybody has to have children, but I'm really glad that I do.
No, what you're grateful for is you being grateful for what
it was the right thing. Again, Jose Rivera, one of his things is have babies and make plays for them.
Oh,
yeah, that's one of his like little commandments in that commencement speech is make babies and make plays for them. And I'm like, I did.
Okay.
Done. Yeah.
Look at everybody's crying. They're so happy.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So I think that's where if I didn't quite get to your question, I think it was mostly couched in there, but wow, it's been a long day for both of you, I know, and so appreciative of your time here with us. I mean, this isn't quite our ending, because you still have tomorrow with what's tomorrow?
Yeah.
All day? Double acting.
Double acting. We got coffee in the morning. We got
nice. But this is really nice that we had the entirety of the body here to chat and to hear, not just you, but also Rachel talking so vulnerably about this time. I think we will look back on this in some ways and be thankful that we did have the time to investigate ourselves and kind of step off the wheel a little bit to do that. But thank you so much for being here. Rachel.
This is so great. And I said to a few of you, like, I intend, especially you seniors, I intend to get up there this spring. That's
that's awesome.
It's like an almost promise. Like, I'm just going to get in the car and drive on up there.
Well, you'll be in Boston in the fall, right?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely in Boston in the fall, but I mean, I got to come up and see Kurt anyway. But I want to see you guys. I want to have like a picnic lunch with all of you guys. So if we have to sit apart, we can. A BYO picnic lunch.
Right.
Just so you guys can all see that I'm only 5'1".
I know. Nobody knows how.
Nobody knows how.
Are you really 5'1"?
She is so
no
teeny.
one knows that I'm not an actually full-size grown-up.
She is so teeny. Nothing is cuter than pregnant Kimberly because she's so teeny. She
I love
as
that.
wide as tall when she was pregnant.
But also, I really want to say, Rachel, thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, this process of this distinguished artist came very quick, and Rachel was in the middle of a million things and brought this to us and also to the provost, and it was a resounding yes. So if it wasn't for the artists that are here, like Rachel, we wouldn't have access to incredible people like Kimberly. And so remember that every day, that you know, Rachel has power
Send checks.
all of us. Yeah, and send checks. But again, honestly,
I don't even know what checks
gifts
are.
too. You like gifts? Don't you like gifts? I'm
Right,
always
yeah.
happy with a gift.
I
Even a
am.
simple pair of socks will do sometimes. Just,
Oh,
Yeah.
I do love a good pair. Yeah, especially, yeah, older I get, socks, slippers, pajamas. They just
Lip balm.
soft clothes.
Lip
I know.
balm.
David knows. I have a, yes. The lip balm addiction is intense in my world.
So
Thank
thank you
you.
everyone for
Thank you
coming.
all.
Again, Kimberly, I can't thank you enough for bringing so
can't
much
thank you. I
energy
wanna
to
read the
tonight,
chat.
and maybe even more questions than answers, but that's where we as artists need to be, right?
Yeah.
Questioning everything. So thank you very much. And I'm going to end the recording, but have an awesome night, everyone, and thank you for coming.